USALA Media, estamos aquí de nuevo en Campus. Este programa lo dirige Dani Ramos, les habla Fernando Mendez y nuestra invitada especial hoy es Margie Smith Holt. She is a top-selling author on Amazon, so I'm waiting to borrow some money from Margie. Well, hello, Margie.
Well, hello, Fernando.
So, one way to start this journey, because it is a journey, is an adventure. It's one of those, it's an odyssey. At some point you describe this as an odyssey, is to have you read two things beginning with one day and then up to Carpe Diem.
You know, I should have asked you before we started if you were going to ask me to read, because
you're going to need glasses?
I'm going to need some glasses, I think. But we'll
it's okay if you need them.
We'll try. I think we can try.
Yeah.
You want me to go from one day?
Yeah, up to Carpe Diem, which is it's like.
Okay. So, one day, while swapping vacation stories at the office, another coworker, recently returned from hiking in the Rockies, said she thought she'd like to have her ashes scattered there where she died, when she died. This prompted some banter about where others would like to make their final resting places. No one talked about where they might like to spend their remaining living days. Wasn't that nuts? I took inventory of the signs. My last single college friend had just announced she was pregnant. I couldn't stop thinking about two colleagues in the local press corps, not that much older, who had recently died, both suddenly and within weeks of each other. Life can change in an instant. Everybody in my family was healthy. It was an appropriate time to leave my job. I didn't have children. I did have a little cash. There was nothing stopping me. I was essentially free of responsibility. I might never have this much freedom again. What if I didn't take a chance and regretted it later? Carpe diem and all that.
Thank you. So that's, I saw that as the launching your trip, this voyage that will last, how many pages? Over 300.
311.
So you know the number exactly. Well, so that everybody knows, we're friends, long disclosure first. So I can say really that I knew you before you became famous, who you are now. So
thank you for calling me famous. I think I will be after this interview.
Yeah, so. Right. So I really wonderful book.
Thank you.
First of all,
Thank you.
I'm not surprised that it's selling, because it is word of mouth is going to spread. I mean, when people like a book, like you can't wait to tell you, like, read this. It's fascinating. But it's a voyage that is physical, because you were at sea, navigating the high seas. But it's a voyage of the soul, also. It's sort of I see it as searching for meaning for your life. What am I doing? Where am I going? And where have I arrived? Where am I now? So that's what we're going to explore in a few minutes. We never do justice to the whole thing, but so what made you decide to just pick up and leave?
So I was kind of facing down a milestone birthday. I was getting close to 40, and I was working in Philadelphia at the time.
So you haven't been telling me the truth. I thought you were 39.
I know, yeah. I know, I'm trying to figure out how to tell these stories and still be turning 40, but still be turning 40 now, like 17 years after I started all of this. And I had a good job. I worked most of my 20s and 30s in the television news business, and then had left that and was working at the Kimmel Center when it opened, and I liked that job. But after it opened, after a couple of years, my heart wasn't really in it, and so I'm turning 40. I'm in a job that I feel so about, and then I had a big breakup, and I always thought, well, by the time I'm 40, I'm going to be married, I'm going to have some kids, and I'll have a job, and none of that was working out the way I wanted to. So after the big breakup, a coworker suggested that I go on vacation rather than throw myself into work, which is what I would have done. And we ended up on the island of St. John in the Virgin Islands. And had
Why St. John?
She picked it.
Yeah.
So completely random. This was a very persistent coworker who kept coming in saying we need to go on a scuba vacation because we were both scuba divers, and I didn't want to go. And it's just she would just come into my office every morning, and finally, I mean, just to shut her up, I said, here's my credit card, book whatever you want. I don't care, just do it. So she picked St. John and the Virgin Islands, which I knew nothing about, but they do have good scuba diving. And then on our way down, the day we left for vacation, another friend. Can I tell this story?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, because you're married to this friend now. So,
Please. It's Ellen Hutton.
Ellen Hutton, my very dear friend, your wife, yes, who also worked with us, was not going on the vacation, got laid off from the Kimmel Center.
And that's a part of the book that says "In Search of a Job" for Ellen, right?
Yeah, I mean, everybody was. There were a number of layoffs, and so we're going down this vacation, myself and this other friend, and we find out this terrible news from back home. Our friends have lost their jobs. Ellen especially. What are we going to do? We need to. I feel so bad. This is terrible. Let's do something to cheer her up. We should bring her back something. And it's like, well, what does she need? A bottle of rum? A sarong? A piece of jewelry? No, Ellen needs a job. Well, let's find her a job while we're here. And it kind of started as a joke where we would just, we'd go into a restaurant or we'd be out on a boat and we'd say, oh, our friend back home who couldn't come on this vacation needs a job. Do you have any job openings? And that was just the entree to hearing all of these stories from all of these other people, whether they were ancestral islanders or other people who had quit their jobs up north somewhere and moved down, talking about how much they loved it there and how much they loved their community and how much they loved their jobs. And then they would say, we're always looking for good people, and they'd give us their boss's phone number. And by the end of the vacation, I was like, well, I don't know if Ellen wants to do this, but I think I might like to do this. And that was the seed.
That was it.
Yeah.
So that's the point where you decide to come here and close shop and basically move south?
Yeah, I mean, I think I came home and thought, you're on the plane coming home from a vacation, right? Anytime you go away someplace you love or anything, let's just stay here.
Yeah, right.
And then you get home and reality kind of sets in. But that little
see all the bills. And
exactly, right. But that little passage you just had me read, that was back in the office right after that vacation. And really, I was there that one day, and there was this discussion from other people returning from vacations talking about where they wanted their ashes to be. It's like,
right.
why are we talking about where we want to be when we're dead? Like, why isn't anybody talking about where they really want to be now?
So this carpe diem, you really took it seriously.
I really took it seriously. Yes, I did. Yeah.
People usually say, carpe diem.
Yeah.
So you land in St. John. But was there a detour before? You had gone someplace else and there was nothing there? Another island you had gone to?
I ended up, when I first moved down, I went with this friend that I had gone on the vacation with, and she thought, she wanted to try out island life too, and thought maybe St. John was too small, because it's a year-round population of maybe 4,000. So we had gone to one of the other U.S. Virgins, St. Croix, to kind of investigate, do a little fact-finding, and just didn't have the same feeling. And then said, well, I don't know, we were talking about this on this little island of St. John, let's go back there and see how that feels. And as soon as we stepped off the boat back onto that island, it was like, yeah, this is the place. It just, it was calling. It was calling to me.
And what was this, the cliffhanger?
The Cliffhanger was the name of the house that we moved into, where I lived my first year there.
And you described it as a very interesting thing, because actually it's like a cliffhanger.
Yeah, a sort of. I think maybe it was a year after we had been there that someone, you have to put this in perspective of the time. It was early 2000s. We didn't have smartphones, right? We didn't have social media. You weren't taking pictures of everything. And I think the first time I actually saw a picture of the house from the water, and it's like, how is that even hanging on that rock? So the name was appropriate, yeah. But it had this amazing view. So, the whole house just kind of jutted out, and with this big wraparound porch, and it was right over the harbor in this little outpost of a community called Coral Bay, and that's where the whole book is set.
Were you afraid to look out the window just in case?
I'm not afraid of heights, so I wasn't. But like I'm saying, like, a lot of things that happened on this whole journey, if I had thought about them too much, I would have thought that was really stupid. Or
I did that.
I did that. Wait, what? So, yeah, I was just at that point where I just thought, you know, didn't somebody famous say, ever notice what the hell is often the right answer? It's just like, what the hell? Okay. Yeah.
Which brings us to something you picked up by living there, by earning a living there. You were working at a cafe or something.
A dive bar, really,
dive
but
bar,
yes,
yeah, right.
Burger Shack.
Right, shack. And then you pick up sailing, because that's sort of a natural activity in that part of the world.
Yes.
So how did that happen?
Yeah, so I was a scuba diver. That was the original vacation, was to go diving. All of the Virgin Islands are a huge sailing area, but I had never been on a sailboat. So when I first moved down, I thought I would get a job on a dive boat, and because of where I ended up living on this kind of quote-unquote other side of the island, that was a big sailing community. I was like, well, okay, maybe I'm supposed to learn how to sail while I'm here, because that's all everybody talks about all day long is boats, boats, boats. And yeah, so.
Yeah, so what was distinguishing about that particular island, that's where you wanted to be? I know that the physical beauty of the place and the sunsets and all that, but why that above St. Croix or the other islands that you had seen?
I don't know. I mean, yes, it's beautiful, but there's so many islands are beautiful.
Right.
There was just, it was just a vibe. I guess that sounds a little woo-woo, but
Right.
a kind of a feeling. Because when we kind of investigated, oh, maybe St. Croix, it's a little bit bigger, and then it just didn't have the same feel. But even when I first moved down, I didn't really think about it being super long term. It was
Right.
just, it's a beautiful place. It is 3/4 national park on St. John, so I will say that it's got that extra beauty because
Right.
more of the land is preserved. And
It's not full of hotels or any place.
right, right, and then
But
once,
reading your book, you seem to find people very quickly to relate to. So you start sort of, all of a sudden you build connections.
right.
And so I think that helped, right?
Right. So in the beginning, when I thought, well, who knows what's going to happen? Maybe this lasts, maybe it doesn't. And then once I was there, it didn't take long to just kind of become enchanted with this really sort of quirky community. Like I said, a mixture of local islanders, and then it sort of had an expat feel, although you can't really say expat because it's American, it's U.S., right?
Well, yeah, you should tell that to our former president who didn't know Puerto Rico was.
That's right. Right. So all Americans down there, yeah, which I also talk about in the book, yeah, when the hurricanes hit. But this, yeah, I mean, part of it was just you sort of, I mean, anybody you meet anywhere has a story, right? We all have
Right.
stories, and some people spend a lot of time telling their stories, and other people you have to draw them out.
Well, as I said at the beginning, it's a physical voyage, or several trips actually, sailing and all this, exploring, but also a spiritual search. And I think the connection, and that's where I want to explore all these, because there are very interesting characters along the way. And they help you build memories. I think that's what we do all the time. We sort of store memories, with trips and so on. Now we have pictures in our phone, but a lot of the memories that live with us and change us. And that's where I'm going to go with this exploration of your odyssey. So, estamos en USALA Media. Les habla Fernando Mendez, aquí en Campus, en compañía de Margie Smith Holt, who has written a magnificent book. It's not on any map, and it's being sold in Amazon. So, hurry up and buy it. We'll be back in a minute. Pagano's Market and Bar has been serving gourmet Italian foods in Center City for 3 generations. Call Matthew Pagano for all your catering needs And during these difficult times, please mention Fernando Mendez and receive a nice discount along with free delivery. Paganos also makes the finest gift boxes in the city for all your holiday needs. Visit paganosmarketandbar.com. Amigos de USALA Media, estamos aquí de nuevo en Compass, en compañía de Margie Smith Holt, who has written this book that I really loved. I mean, it's not just you are my friend. From the beginning, it just sort of grabbed me, and I said, this is interesting, you know. And I knew, because, again, we're friends, and I knew you were writing this, and I know I lived through part of this, you know, indirectly, knowing what was happening to you, what was going on. And so, and then like, sometimes you know people and you know they're doing things, like, you know, somebody's an architect and they're designing until you see what they have done. You say like, wow, you did that? So here I am. You actually wrote this. So,
I finished it.
Yeah. So I want to explore a little bit of that, because the process, the discipline of writing. So many of us say like, oh yeah, I want to write this. I want to write my memoir. I want to write this. And you actually sat down, you did it. And what kind of, do you set a like discipline, a deadline? Because I know many writers who have like a strict schedule. I'm going to work from 7 in the morning until noon, and then I'll stop. You know, did you have any kind of schedule like that?
I guess if I'm honest, I probably was always trying to have a schedule, but didn't really have a schedule. Okay. And coming, I think, from, as you know, from a news background, when you are on a deadline, you learn to work really well under a deadline, with the deadline pressure, and you're just absolutely abysmal without one. Because suddenly, oh, there's no deadline. So
no schedule.
I completely fell into that. Yeah. And I didn't start out with an intention to write a book, right? I mean, I went down there not wanting to do anything that I had done before. I didn't want to do television. I didn't want to write about anything. I just, you know, got a waitressing job. I wanted to scuba dive. I wanted to, you know, put all that aside. And, you know, you can run away, but you can't hide from yourself, or that kind of expression. I think I met the editor of the local newspaper my second week there. My roommate blew my cover and told him that I had won some Emmys in Philadelphia, and he asked me to write for the paper, and I said no. And I meant it. I was like, yeah, don't really want to do that. And then, because it was a small place, I kept running into him, because he kept seeing him everywhere I went, and he'd say, you know, and he'd try to bribe me, you know, I'll pay you $50 to write about anything you want to write about, you know. Don't you have any good ideas for stories? And I would just sit there and think, oh my God, this is a story, and this is a story. The place was full of stories. And then he said, well, don't you have an email list? Aren't you writing some emails to people back home telling them what you're doing down here? And I was. He said, I'll pay you to print those. And that was kind of how that started. And so I started doing the writing. But I'm telling this story also because, I had been a journalist for 20 years. I'd been writing all my life, and it wasn't until I was waitressing at Skinny Legs Burger Shack in St. John that I started to think of myself as a writer. As a writer. And because I would go home at night, and I said my brain would be free. I felt like I had all this creative energy because my brain wasn't full up of all those rat race kind of
deadlines
things
and so
on. And writing was a joy. It was a pleasure to kind of put these stories down. And then some people who read them back home start, journalist friends, saying, hold on to these. This could be a book someday. Mm-hmm. So it was always kind of a back of the mind project, but I didn't really get serious about it until many years later when I was home, and it was kind of away from it all. Like, I really should finish that.
So you start putting things together at that point.
Yeah.
And so here we are. So page 0, no?
Yeah.
You're in front of your computer, and it's like, okay, how do I, remember the beginning, where do I begin? Where do I start? And you have an interesting quote opening. There are two quotes. So that tell us what it's going to be in the book, in a way, because they're very well chosen. And so it is not down on any map. True places
Never are.
never are. And that's from Melville in Moby Dick. And then the mind is its own place and in itself. Wow. It can make heaven of hell a hell of heaven. And that is from Milton.
Paradise Lost.
So, Paradise Lost.
Yeah.
So, and we'll go back to that because that's one of the themes in the
Yes.
in the memoir, that you arrive in this tropical paradise that you see later on. You see what happens there.
Right.
With that. But in the meantime, before that happens, before the events that change it, you have an opportunity to see, to enjoy it, to learn, to meet a lot of people. You create a sort of community in St. John. So,
Yes.
how was that period when you begin to work and as you say, you're writing back home and you're writing, and then somebody's going to pay you to write, you know?
A little.
Right, right. How do you start writing? What is your sort of mechanism? But that you say like, okay, this is my first, no?
Like for the book or for the
But,
individual?
yeah, but in general, to write.
Yeah.
What do you begin? Because you write a lot, not only this novel, or this memoir, but you write reviews. You're a writer, so when you have to write a piece, how do you go about that first line?
It's so funny to think I don't really, how do I go about that?
Yeah.
I think because my TV background really influences how I think about things. So even though there aren't pictures, it's that short news writing, right? So if you're working
Right.
in broadcast, in television or radio, you have to tell a complicated story or a large story in a very short amount of time. So I'll start with the hook. It's like
Right.
kind of what's the grabber, because
Right.
you're writing for an audience, and this isn't just
It's a headline to get the people interested in it.
yeah.
So, your background was what came over, Fox? Is that the first one, television experience?
My first television experience was NJN, New Jersey Public Television. Yeah,
What were you doing there?
I was working first as an assignment editor, producer type person, and then I was a reporter covering southern New Jersey.
You went to the fires and all that?
Absolutely, yep, and the farms and the storms and everything. And KYW News Radio, I worked there. That was my first Philly radio job. I worked at some smaller stations first, and then the WB. I think it was the WB when I left. PHL, Channel 17, was my kind of longest Philadelphia TV term, and
Right.
I anchored the news there too.
Yeah, because we started talking about the Kimmel job when you
Yes.
sort of decided to change
Yes.
things, take a different direction
Yeah.
to your life in search of meaning.
In search of meaning, yes.
So that experience is what has made you into a great writer, because it's not just like media experience, not only being a reporter, but also you have accumulated all these experiences traveling and sort of forgetting about your previous life. Here's my new life, right?
There was a lot of good material. I used to say, right, all I had to do was take good notes.
Right.
Yeah.
And as I said before, you quickly establish sort of your own colony of friends and relationships. Some of them that you probably still have, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Because you have gone back to St. John.
Yeah. There was a little bit of a hazing period. I mean, I'm sure. I think a lot of people go down, right, thinking they want to live a different life, and not everybody's cut out for it. So I think the
Right.
locals tend to kind of, look at you.
Were they tough on you?
They were tough.
Yeah?
Yeah. They were always helpful and kind, but you always sort of felt like they were definitely sizing you up.
Right.
And friends have since told me, they kind of put a softer spin on it. It's like, well, you get used to people leaving, and so you don't want to get close because then they're going to leave. But, I took it as, myself and my friend that it's these two city slickers, they're never going to make it. They're not going to be able to handle,
Right.
the plumbing and the bugs and all the other kind of vagaries of island living. So, but it's okay. We'll just stick it out, see what happens. And I think we sort of gradually wore them down. And when I started doing my little newspaper stories, and the first story I did was a Thanksgiving story, and nobody would tell me their name. Like, people wouldn't talk to me. And I just thought, back home, this is a happy story. This isn't even a crime story or a corruption story. This is a nice story about a community dinner. And people were just like, why are you asking me my name? Why do you want to? And it's like, okay, well.
You never know if some of these expats are hiding.
Well,
something.
There was a rumor going around that there was big witness protection territory, so I thought maybe that's true.
And
I don't know.
They don't want to give you the name.
But that story is relevant because it comes back in the end, because I think I was there and they saw that I stayed, I hung in there. Like, that story about Thanksgiving, I wrote it. It was like I had to write it with off-the-record conversations, but I wrote it. And when the story came out, and of course now you're face to face with everybody. It's
Right.
not like TV where you're putting it out there and you're not even sure who's watching or listening. Like, I knew who I was writing about.
It comes back to you.
It comes right back to you. And so I remember kind of thinking, like, how are they going to react? And people were very generous, and they really liked it. And I remember walking into my job waitressing, and one of the guys coming up to me and saying, "You wrote that story about Thanksgiving, I said, "Yeah." He's like, "You're a really good writer. How come you're a waitress?" And that just made me laugh. It's like, oh, yeah, well, no one knew.
You have no idea.
You have no idea, yeah. And as I became more a part of the community, I got to get into the stories a little bit more. And then, 17 years later, when I was back after these 2 hurricanes hit, people trusted me to tell their stories. So that was...
I had to ask this. Is there anyone who came back to you and said, like, why do you write that? Why do you say that? Anybody?
I mean,
No?
there's always the outlier, who's
Right,
not going to be
right.
happy. And actually, it was my old boss at the Burger Shack who's been giving me good advice very recently, saying, "You know what, Margie? Like, not everybody's going to be happy, but that's okay. That's just life, and that's what happens. And and I know that you're doing this from a place of love and with your skills, but it's sort of." It's good to get those reminders. But for the most part, no. I mean, for the most part, I think people have been happy when if this is a memoir, the traditional thing to do is to change all the names because it's a true story, and that's how I wrote it in my draft. And when I went back to the island to fact check some of the stories, and the people that I wrote about said, "Well, can you use my real name?" And so that was a great. There we've come full circle. So
Right.
that was a great compliment. It's like, well, I guess so. If you're happy with everything, yeah, they wanted their stories told. Oh, yeah.
That's great. Now, at some point, you go from working at a restaurant, a dive, and become a sailor.
Yeah.
At some point, you're like,
I
"Wait a
still
minute.
don't really know how that happened.
I'm moving through the pages and said, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
What happened?
There's a lot in this book, right? Well, it was, like I said, I was in a sailing community, so everybody sailed. Thanksgiving was also, I moved down at Thanksgiving, that's why that was the first story. And in addition to the meal, there was a big regatta, and that was the big annual event
the
there.
regatta. Okay, so at some point you talk about, there were 3 women, your team was, you said, you described that, I forgot, blonde, all blonde.
They all blonde, yes.
Right?
Yeah, Team Skinny Legs, all the waitresses from the Burger Shack became a team and raced. But even that I had to wait for. Like in the beginning, I would just kind of like stand on the dock and see who would take on extra crew to go out, for a sail on a Wednesday afternoon when they would have, just a kind of an informal race. So it was probably a good, I don't know, 6 or 8 months before the the sailing boss of the women. It was a lot of women sailors in this little community of Coral Bay, very strong, tough, intimidating women. And like I said, there was a little bit of a hazing period, just sort of feel like, and one day, this one woman who was like the head of the yacht club and all was fine, like, you want to crew today? And it's like, yeah, I think I do, yeah. So, and then, yeah, we had the all women, I guess we're supposed to say, but back then we were just the all-girl blonde crew, Team Skinny Legs on Sarah's boat. Yeah.
And there was a wretched wenches. What was it?
Oh, the drenched wenches.
The drenched.
Yeah, because we'd go to this one regatta that we went to. I think that might have been the first one actually, and our captain wanted us all to change into dresses for the the captain's meeting at the yacht club, the night before,
right.
and this was. I should probably say this too. To me, again, not knowing much about sailing and coming from this northeast part of the country, to me, sailing was yachting. Yachting, it's what the rich people
right.
up in New England do with big fancy boats. This was a community of scrappy sailors on, little boats that were kind of floating bachelor pads, and some of them barely holding together, very kind of low-key sailing. But they all had very good skills. So we're going off to the yacht club, but we're coming off this boat. We're all dirty because we've been sailing and working all day, and she insisted we all change into dresses so we can make an appearance. And as soon as you get in the dinghy to go ashore, it starts pouring rain. So you're all dressed up and wet, but that's kind of how the whole 2 years was. I think I feel like we're drenched wenches. Yeah.
And this is only the beginning. We have not even started this voyage. So estamos en USALA Media, en Campus, les habla Fernando Mendez, en compañía de Margie Smith Holt, hablando de su libro que acaba de publicar sobre sus memorias de viajes en el mar. Regresamos en un momento, no se vayan. Amigos de USALA Media, estamos aquí de nuevo en Campus, en compañía de Margie Smith Holt, hablando sobre su libro Not on Any Map. Está publicado por Amazon. Probablemente no hay todavía una traducción al español, pero habrá algún día. Maybe it will be a Spanish translation of your...
Would you like to do it?
Sure.
You helped me with some of my very limited Spanish portion of the book. Thank you for that.
If you would trust me with that, that's a very delicate task. I would love to do it. Yeah. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
Because then you have to share your millions.
Yeah, right. Right. If you want to work for a percentage, we have a deal.
So, as I said at the end of the last segment, we're only beginning here.
We're only on page 10.
We never finish this odyssey if we continue this way. But so at some point, all this mention of Malta and the Knights of
St. John.
St. John, which is funny, no? What a serendipity,
Yes.
the connection. You also mentioned Carl Jung at some point in terms of, things, coincidences,
yes.
Which he actually wrote about that sort of our life sometimes is guided by destiny. We see as coincidence, but it's predestination. I don't know, whatever. In this case, it seemed like your sailing was leading you someplace, and you end up in Malta, in Valletta,
yes,
the capital.
Yeah, which was incredible. So I had spent this time kind of sailing around the Virgin Islands, and that was this amazing experience. And I had this my friends in that community, and then at some point you think, okay, well, maybe I'd like to go somewhere, instead of going in circles. And everybody, all the sailors in the Virgin Islands talked a lot about this big race in Antigua, further south in the Caribbean. And that was kind of the end of the Caribbean racing season. You would go to Antigua and race in the big boat race there. And I said, oh, well, I think I'd like to do that. And then maybe that would be an end to my Caribbean, journey. And one of my friends, another waitress at Skinny Legs, who was also a sailor, said, yeah, that's great. You should definitely do that. Go down there, sail in the Antigua Regatta, and then when that's over, you hop on one of those big yachts and sail across the Atlantic. Because how many people can say they've done that in their lives? And I was like, okay, that sounds good, And so that's what I did. So I sailed with some friends down to Antigua, and we raced there. And I talked my way onto one of the bigger boats in Antigua to sail across the Atlantic the first time, thinking I would end up in Antibes or in Palma, one of the big yachting centers where everyone said, oh, you'll have no trouble getting a boat job with your experience now. You can, hop, which I needed a job, right? So I can only take so much time off to just be sailing around. And I thought, well, that'll be great. So I hop on this boat, honestly, not knowing where it was going, because it wasn't sure, because that's kind of how that works. And turned out that the boat was headed for Malta. And I was like, Malta? Where's Malta? What's Malta? I don't know anything about Malta. Now I'm going to another island I know nothing about. And that was the place where, I did this big sail, and again, I feel like this could be the end of this journey. I could go back to Philadelphia and write a book, not write a book, go back to the news business. This is pretty good. I've accomplished something. But I could also stay and see what happens next. And again, I have to kind of put it back in perspective. 20 years ago, right? There's no smartphones. We had internet, but you had to go to the internet cafe. So you're kind of out there doing this without broadcasting it to everybody. And so I'm trying to decide what to do. And I'm, at the internet cafe, sending my little email to everybody back home, saying, "Oh, here I am. I just sailed across the ocean, trying to sound so brave." And meanwhile, I'm like, I have no money in the bank. I don't have a job because I'm not in a yachting center. I'm in this place I don't know anything about. And okay, my money was up at the internet cafe, went out, walked around, came back, and checking my email to see, anybody going to say anything? What should I do? Maybe someone has a contact.
Somebody did respond.
Well, somebody wrote back and said, Malta, my God, stay in Malta. It's the most fascinating place. It's where journeys converge. It's where East meets West. You're on the most fantastic odyssey of your life. Keep going. And it was just like, yeah, well, okay. And then a few other people kind of weighed in, basically saying the same thing, like, don't forget the job, don't come back, keep going. We all want to live through your adventures. And so that kind of emboldened me a little bit. And then, I spent a little bit of time kind of touristing around in Malta and learned that it was the Knights Hospitaller, the Knights of St. John, who founded the whole place. And thinking, okay, I've landed in the place that's built by the Knights of St. John. So what is it with this St. John place? And I would say from the beginning of my journey, all the way back to Philadelphia when it all started, like once I said, okay, I'm going to do this, things started falling into place. Contacts here, I'd talk to people, and somebody wanted to buy the car, somebody knew a contact here, and that just kind of continued to happen. And it really happened in Malta, where I fell into a place to live, and another situation where a boat was going on this amazing regatta to all of these exotic destinations, and it was kind of that was sort of the watershed, where it's just like, okay, I don't think I am going back to anything. I think it's just going forward to see what comes next. And it was a scary place to be, but it was exciting.
And that's what I was reading about Saint-Tropez and all those other famous ports around the Mediterranean. Amazing experience. Very interesting period. One thing I want to talk about, you mentioned several times, but strong women that you said about the yacht club lady.
Yes.
And then in Valletta, you find another one of those characters, a very strong woman who actually helps you.
Yes.
In a way. So all along the way, if you're a feminist, you want to read this book because it's full of strong, interesting women.
Yes.
The author especially. But,
Thank you.
Amazing. So the one in Valletta, so I forgot her name now, but
She was a character, and that was another case of, I was kind of wandering around. I had to get off the boat that I was on. I wasn't quite sure what I was doing next, but I was really sort of enthralled with Malta, and I wanted to stay and learn more about that country. And I wanted to stay in the old city, the old part of the city, because that just sort of felt like it was, kind of the ghosts of the people who were there before. It just really called to me. I read the history of it.
right.
And again, I'm still looking for my next gig. I don't really know where I'm going, and I stumbled upon this little museum and this. I said it was like she was like an elf, like this little sprightly woman with her blue twinkly eyes, saying, "Come on in and have a tour." And I was just like, I don't have time for a tour. I'm trying to find a job, and I don't know what I'm doing. And but anyway, she beckoned me in, and I'm waiting for the tour, and she's telling me her whole life story. And she was a British woman who had also her husband had been stationed there, and she fell in love with the island and moved down with her 6 kids. And anyway, so she just had this great affinity for her adopted home. And I said, well, I'm liking it too. I think I'm going to do this regatta in a couple of weeks, but I'm looking for a place to stay for about 2 weeks. Is there any place in this part of the island? And no, there's no hotels here, and there's no B&Bs that we know of, But anyway, go on the tour, So I went on the tour with the tour guide, and by the time I was finished the tour, she says, well, Margaret, I just want you to know that I called my husband, and he said that as long as you're fine with the 3 cats and the 2 dogs and the box, we'll move the boxes out of the spare bedroom, and you can stay in our place for the next 2 weeks for a room and board of some ridiculous amount of money. It was like
$15.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, right.
How's that sound? I was like, I think that sounds amazing. Yeah. And so I got my wish. Like I got a place to stay for cheap with this personal tour guide who took me all over the island and taught me the history of Malta. And meanwhile, I had this, not a boat job cleaning boats like I thought I was heading to, but a cruise spot on this classic yacht that was going off to write this 6 ports of call, 2-week Mediterranean
So, but that was
race.
your base of operations already. You found one.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
So it was, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, did this just happen? I'm not sure this really, did I understand? Well, she spoke English, right?
Right.
We had that conversation in English, because not all the conversations were in English, and then you kind of think, what did I just agree to? I don't know, but he said, come on board, so I'm going on board.
At some point, she makes fun of you. The expression was awesome.
Oh,
So, like,
awesome. Why you Americans can't say anything besides, it's so awesome, which... Yeah, she wasn't wrong, but I got to tell you, a lot of the stuff out there, so awesome. I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
But this whole story is awesome, so we'll continue. And unfortunately, there are like time constraints because we'll never do justice to the whole story. But I want to move on to another part that I find quite interesting, and then towards the end.
Okay.
So. Estamos en USALA Media. Les habla Fernando Mendez aquí en Campus, en compañía de Margie Smith Holt, que escribió una novela que se titula Not on Any Map. No está en ningún mapa. Y sus aventuras en tierra y en mar. Regresamos en un momento. No se vayan.
USALA Media.
Amigos de USALA Media, estamos aquí de nuevo en Campus, en compañía de Margie Smith Holt. hablando sobre su libro Not on Any Map. No está en ningún mapa. Ah,
I like
no
hearing the
está.
title in Spanish.
No está en ningún mapa. It's not on any map. And it is on the map, but it's a very tiny dot, right?
Yes, right.
And that's where you sort of change your life.
Yes.
And you found paradise, a beautiful place, beautiful island. As you said before, whether part of it was reserved already, was set aside by, was Rockefeller, somebody?
You Rockefeller.
One of the
Yes,
Rockefellers.
yeah. Yeah.
So, this beautiful island, and part of your odyssey is dealing with this drastic change caused by Mother Nature's unjustified anger at the beauty of the island.
Right.
So, how long after you were there was the first really strong storm that where you experienced a hurricane and it's like, wow.
So I didn't live through any of the hurricanes. I didn't
No.
experience any of it. When I first moved down, I mean, they had already had Hurricane Hugo and Hurricane Marilyn, but there was, and people talked about it or wouldn't talk about it. I mean, so you kind of knew the remnants were there, but there was a sort of unusual period of calm for a lot of years. I mean, it was to the point where when the big one did finally hit, some people said, you never want to say you're complacent, but it had been so relatively calm for 15 years. And when this one happened, and I'll tell you this story too, because it goes back to your questions about the writing process, right? I'd actually had finished a first draft or a second draft or whatever I was on, a draft of the book that kind of just talked about my journey, the sailing journeys, the kind of personal journey of changing my life up a little bit, and had finished it, put an end on it 2 weeks, I think, before Hurricane Irma hit, which was 2017. So I had been living back in the States, I don't know, maybe 10 years at that point, and going back to St. John whenever I could, just to visit. I had friends there. I got married. I honeymooned there, but I wasn't living there. But it was still, kind of a second home. And then when this storm came in September of 2017, obviously you hear on the weather, right? That's hurricane season. Things are coming along, and then it's kind of zeroing in closer, and you sort of realize, oh, it looks like it's going to hit the Virgin Islands, and how close is it hitting? It's like, it looks like it's going to be very close. I was in New Jersey at the time, watching all this on TV, keeping an eye on it, and then you're sort of at this point where it's become this massive Category 5 monster storm. You see those big, horrible satellite images. And I'm watching the Weather Channel, and of course, the Weather Channel's talking about hitting Florida because a lot of people live in Florida, right? And as they're talking about, what are the odds? Is it going to go here? Is it going to go there? You're looking at it, it's like, it's right on top of the Caribbean, all of the Caribbean,
Yeah.
And you want to say, like, there's some countries down there and people there, right? And then they're talking about, well, it's about to hit, it's going to hit the U.S., so it's going to hit Florida and hit the U.S. in another day or two. It's like, no, it's hitting the U.S. right now, because you see, there's Puerto Rico and there's the U.S. Virgin Islands, and no one was talking about that. So that was just maddening, but not surprising.
Right.
And then, so now it's hit, and there's no news. There's no news coming out because there's no power, there's no communication, and everyone's just kind of like, well, what happened? And then you see this satellite picture comes out, maybe a day later, whatever. So you've got this image from space, and all these lush green islands are brown.
Right.
And then maybe some news came out from, I don't know, St. Martin or one of the other islands a little further down. But there was still no news about the Virgin Islands. It took, I think, 48 hours before any kind of news came through to even say, we're here,
Right.
we're alive.
Right. Were you concerned for the friends that you had made there?
For sure, yeah. And, there was a huge network in in the continental states,
Right.
you know, who are all, and here now suddenly social media, which maybe I wasn't such a big fan of. Social media is an amazing thing because, right, everyone's communicating who heard from somebody else. And
Right.
so let's swap information. I mean, there was none at first. And then when it would come in, you know, people would report, oh, well, so-and-so was safe, or someone would set up a site where people could check in. And that was at least comforting to know that, you know, so you kind of got the news then that people were alive. But you didn't, that was it. You didn't know anything else. How bad was the destruction? And,
Right.
you know.
So part of your book at the end deals with the rebuilding and how you see a little bit of progress going back
Yes.
to see that. You know?
Yeah.
But I'm sure many lives were changed like forever. You know?
For sure. Yeah.
That's what happened with that kind of storm. But your personal journey, and you very quickly went over I got married. But you met Steve Holt, who, for whatever reason, said, I'm going to marry this unemployed sailor. and here you are.
Yeah, I know. To this day, I still have a kind of funny feeling because I think his family thinks of me as that girl who never had a real job. Like, in my mind, all I did was work from the time, you know, I was old enough in high school, my 2 jobs and, you know, radio, you know what it's like in
Right.
this business to kind of get ahead, and, you know, kind of worked myself to death and never went anywhere or did anything interesting. And then suddenly it's like, no, I guess I really did become another person because they only know me as, yeah, like, it's sort of like, what does she do exactly? So, yeah, so I got lucky.
So, right.
Unemployed sailor person. Putting that on my resume.
We should put it on the resume. So, that's part of like, you have changed your life in so many ways. So that chapter also, that contributes to that final, like, it brings sort of a sense of accomplishment, peace. You have done something that you expected to do a long time ago, but in the meantime you had all these other vicissitudes that you brought upon yourself, basically. I want to explore the world. And at some point you mentioned how much the Earth is actually covered by water. What is it, more than 71% or something?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you get the figure. And it's like, yeah, it's water everywhere. And so you explore a lot of this territory, the waters of the world, especially the Caribbean and the Mediterranean.
Yes.
You cross the Atlantic.
Yeah.
So we come to the end of this. Have you found yourself, as you write your book, do you come to the realization that, yes, this journey has changed me? Where are you now?
Yeah, for sure. One of my friends who followed the journey, her question when I came back from this, because the final part of the physical journey was this sail across the Atlantic in a 30-foot boat, which is like, like doing it.
That's insane, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, and my mother thought so too, but she didn't know how big the boat was until after. It's like Moby Dick territory. I mean, you're just out there in the elements, feeling like this. People always want to ask about the storms. Were there storms and how was the weather? And I always tell them there was bad weather, but it was those days that were sort of calm and the same. And there were 2 of us on the boat, so you're alone for a lot of it because you're taking turns kind of keeping watch while the other one is sleeping. So even though I was never alone in charge, it was plenty of nights that you sit on a boat and you look up at the stars and kind of contemplate the universe and your place in it. And I think a real sense of peace came from that, where you sort of, all the things that really don't matter, kind of fall away. And it's a lot of time to be alone with your own thoughts.
That's a long time.
You're just you,
right.
And because you got to stay awake, and it's your thoughts. So when I came back, one of my friends back home and said, did it change your DNA? And were you close to God out there?
Interesting.
Those were her two. And those, I think that kind of just gets to the heart of that, the personal journey, you know? Yeah, I was, close to God out there, close to whatever it is that's out there. You're close to it out there. And it did change my DNA. It changed my DNA into, you know, me who was running away from being a reporter. Turns out I'm a storyteller.
So new and improved Margie.
New and improved, yeah. Unemployed, but new and improved. Yeah, I'm broke, but I'm funny. We used to say that one too. It's like, yeah, I'm poor, but I'm good company.
Yeah, well, you would not be poor anymore if they're buying your books on Amazon right now. Anyway, Margie, I want to thank you very much for coming on my show.
Thank you, Fernando.
This has been a wonderful chat for me, talking to you, because, first of all, I love the book.
Thank you.
And I love you. You're a great friend, and I wish you the best with
Great.
this book. So buy, millions of you, buy it.
Thank you.
So, muchas gracias por acompañarnos en el día de hoy. Estuvimos con Margie Smith Holt y su Not on Any Map, un libro que acaba de publicar. Esperamos que ustedes lo compren, está en Amazon. Los esperamos aquí en compañía de don, ¿cómo se llama este señor que está aquí atrás? Don Daniel Ramos. Él dirige este programa. Los esperamos a ustedes. Hasta la próxima.